Yeah, I always have to keep an emergency inhaler because of my asthma. And it got particularly bad this past year. I ended up getting a really bad respiratory infection from the wildfire smoke from Canada, believe it or not.
Wow.
And it actually threw me down for probably 6 to 7 months where I could barely walk to the refrigerator. And that's why I was excited to find your podcast when I found out Steve was on it, because I was listening to him talk about his journey.
Hey everyone, this is Jeremy, and thanks for tuning in to the Price Points podcast. Here at Price Points, we believe in finding fun ways to stay active. And in this episode, talking to Jessie and Josh from Dirt Don't Hurt podcast. Now, Dirt Don't Hurt is a podcast that covers all things outdoors. And in this episode, you'll find out exactly how this great couple were able to share their love for the outdoors together. They talk about places where they've hiked, some tips and tricks as far as anything outdoors related. And we also talk about some of the, I guess you could say, challenges that they go through when they're out camping and doing these outdoor adventures. I don't want to spoil too much about this episode. I will say I had a great time talking to the two of them and really, really love their podcast. You should definitely check it out. It's one that I subscribe to and I listen to and just find it a breath of fresh air. The two of them are just really great people, and I think you'll enjoy this episode. In fact, do enjoy this episode. Please feel free to give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with your friends. That being said, here we go with Jessie and Josh from Dirt Don't Hurt. All right, I want to thank Jessie and Josh here from Dirt Don't Hurt podcast. Guys, introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the podcast.
I'm Jessie.
I'm Josh.
And we have a outdoorsy podcast that is something you could listen to if you're not outdoorsy and you want to be outdoorsy, because I feel like we've kind of tried everything multiple ways, like the hard way, and then finally figured out the easy way that we can tell everyone, like, here's maybe how you could do it, and it would be a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think we've spent money on different things, and we've kind of filtered out the necessary items, and at least for us, that might be helpful to other people.
And so you guys, and when you say outdoorsy, I think, one thing, and I really enjoyed this right before we started recording. I even mentioned it the last episode as far as this recording that I listened to. You all had a special guest, a friend on there who is a cyclist. And so you guys cover everything from hiking to biking to, like you said, anything that has to do with outdoors. And I do love the approach that you all take as well, kind of like what you just said. It's for people like me who love getting out there. It's also for people who may want to dip their toe into a certain thing, whether it be, camping or hiking, and that you guys kind of say, hey, here's our experience, here are recommendations. And I think that's really cool. I think it's awesome that you guys do that.
Yeah, I don't think we're really experts on any one thing, but we definitely dabble in a variety of things.
So what led you all to, what led you all to starting the podcast?
We had started a YouTube channel years and years ago when we were looking for a little camper. We wanted a teardrop camper, and we had finally found a company we were very interested in. And I like to do my research, and I couldn't find any videos from a customer that was giving you their honest opinion of a product. And so it took months and months of researching, and finally I was like, you know what, we're just going to get it. So we bought a hiker trailer, and once we purchased it, we decided, well, we'll do a YouTube video. That way, if somebody else is interested, they know what you have to do and all the little quirks of it. And that's kind of how this all started. And Josh doesn't love to be on camera, which is hilarious because he played in a band for years and years, but he's like, no, I don't love it. So it turned into a podcast. So
we already had recording equipment.
Yeah.
So it kind of just seemed like, hey, why don't we just
and that way you don't have to
podcast.
be you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to, but if you want to be, you can.
Awesome. So I guess, as far as all the things that you all do outdoors, what's the favorite or maybe top 2 favorite things that you all love doing together?
I love car camping, I would say, is my favorite, and hiking, which you can usually combine the two, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pick.
Yeah, Josh likes everything.
I definitely like I like the bike packing a lot.
Mm-hmm. And
fun. We've done that a couple of times. One of my favorite things we did outdoors was we did a couple guided like climbing sessions. And then but probably my favorite thing we did together was a fly fishing trip in Vermont.
Oh yeah, that was fun. Yeah. We'll do anything.
Yeah, we'll do anything. Yeah.
Fly fishing in Vermont. That's wow. I've got a picture in my head. I've only been to Vermont once, and it was very brief, and it was beautiful area. So I can only imagine that sounds pretty sweet.
It was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I think I came across you all shortly after chatting with Steve downhill hiking.
Yes.
And, Steve was a guest on the show, really, really nice guy, and has a heck of a story. I think he lost, and I don't have it in front of me, but gosh, lost over 100 pounds, and really started that journey, a few years ago and hiked, and now he's starting to run, and, he's out of, I think maybe between where I'm located here in Tennessee and where you all are located in Maryland. I think he's kind of right in the middle there in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so I think that, his story about his weight loss is great. But anyway, I'm going down a weird rabbit hole, all to say that when we connected, I said, hey, would you all be interested being on here? One thing I love saying to people or asking people is like, what is there anything you want to discuss or anything you want to talk about? And listening to your all's podcast, I haven't heard this in an episode, and maybe it's in an episode I haven't listened to yet. But Jessie, you brought up you have asthma, and Josh, you have okay, I've got it in front of me. I want to make sure I say it correctly. Polycystic kidney disease.
Yep.
Am I even close to saying that?
Oh, yeah, that's it. Yep.
All right. Good deal. That Southeast education's paying off. That's fantastic.
There you go.
So I guess kind of walk us through that, and with the two of you, especially when it comes to outdoor activities. And are there things that you have to kind of like watch and adjust, when you're out there, when you're out there doing, like you all love to say, and I love the phrase, outdoorsy things?
Yeah, I always have to keep an emergency inhaler because of my asthma. And it got particularly bad this past year. I ended up getting a really bad respiratory infection from the wildfire smoke from Canada, believe it or not.
Wow.
And it actually threw me down for probably 6 to 7 months, where I couldn't barely walk to the refrigerator. And that's why I was excited to find your podcast when I found out Steve was on it, because I was listening to him talk about his journey, and I was slowly getting back into hiking again.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, he was like, yeah, I had a goal set, but it was taking so long. So I started running so I could finish hiking faster.
Yeah.
So I've started doing that because I am not a runner at all. Like if I am running, you better run too, because somebody's after me.
Every non-runner I know says that. They're like, they're like their go-to. If you ever see me running, you need to go with me. Because something's that is the go-to. Yeah.
Well, after I listened to that, I was like, that's a really great idea, because I was setting a goal of 3 miles a day. But I'm like, oh, it takes so long and I have so much to do. So I put the treadmill in the living room, so I had no excuse. And I got my inhaler there just in case. And I started doing my 3 miles, and I would jog occasionally. And now I'm back out on the trails. But yeah, I have to keep that inhaler with me. We're on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, so it's flat and we don't really have a lot of elevation. So when we go out west hiking, it's different, and I absolutely need that inhaler. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Well, so my disease basically is there are cysts that are I was born with. It's a hereditary disease. It grows. Basically, my kidneys are kind of covered in these cysts that over the years progressively grow. Basically until they constrict your kidneys. So for me, I've always had to drink. Real prone to like kidney stones and things like that. So I have to drink a lot more water than the average person would probably need to consume. And I also have to be careful of any like harsh impacts or things like that. You can kind of rupture them. And they also cause high blood pressure. So like certain changes, like a lot of those, like the hydrated meals or things you would take hiking are kind of tough because they're so high in sodium, and they can kind of send my blood pressure out of whack. And I always have to carry a lot more water, which kind of got me to enjoy the bike packing more, because I can kind of attach that, water being one of the heaviest things you're going to carry, can start to attach it to the bike instead of carrying 3-4 liters of water at a time, carrying so much extra weight backpacking. It can be like feel a little harder. So I've had to adjust for things like that mostly.
It really makes us, when we go backpacking, we really have to map out all the water sources and make sure there is actually water for Josh to drink. And sometimes I'll carry extra for him. So I'd say that major impact is it makes us have to carry a tremendous amount of water for any activity that we do.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I can imagine. And then going back to the wildfires, here in East Tennessee, we have quite a few, but the one in Canada, I mean, it kind of came down. When was that? It was
like last May or June, I believe.
Yeah, I'd say maybe June. Yeah.
Because I want to say I was visiting my father in Kentucky, in Eastern Kentucky, and we could see the effects of it there, and
yeah,
so it was so I can only imagine. But and as far as like planning for water, I mean, that's like you said, that's the heaviest darn thing you're going to take.
Right. Yeah.
When you're out there. So yeah, I can only imagine. So going back to the podcast, there's an episode you all did, and I don't want to put out any spoilers for people who didn't listen to it. Before we came on, I think I mentioned to you all, it's one of my favorite episodes you all did, and that was things not, it was gear you've purchased but never used. I think that was the title of it.
That was it.
My notes right here. Okay. Things you've purchased but never used. Now, I will say, just to give away a little spoiler, there is something I use quite a bit. And to the point where I have two. I have a 6-pack and a 12-pack of eggs. I'm a heck of an egg eater. And I will say, when I'm backpacking, they're essential. But I think you mentioned, when you're either car camping or your hike is very short from the car. There's a place. It's actually a really great place I went to last year and I enjoyed, and we backpacked in, and it was only like the shelter was only half a mile from the car. Now it was all uphill. It was all uphill. So in a situation like that, I didn't need these, but when I'm close, so I understand, where y'all are coming from in that sense. But backpacking, and if I want some eggs, I gotta take it. But all that to say, I don't want to ruin the rest of the episode for people. So what are 3 things, besides, I guess, what we talked about, besides water, like what are 3 like go-tos that you all always take when you're venturing out?
So if we're just like car camping, I feel like we always bring a headlamp is key. I bring a headlamp no matter what type of camping we're doing. That is, and you better make sure it's charged. Because we had an incident with a uncharged headlamp. So charge your headlamps. We always have a first aid kit no matter what. And then Josh has to have his coffee, so we have a jet boil stove that he's attached to.
Okay. I think all three of those are pretty important. I mean, that's
yeah.
The coffee thing's a major thing.
That's his number one.
That's the number one. It's like the first aid kit. No, we could probably do without that. Well,
yeah. He's like, just leave it.
Yeah, I could sleep out on in the dirt without a tent before I could not have my coffee in the morning. Rather forget the tent.
Well, Jessie, you mentioned goals earlier. So are there do you all have like a big list for 2024 as far as like some outdoor goals? And if you do you mind sharing some of those?
Well, because I kind of mentioned like I'm getting back into hiking from the respiratory infection I had, and I just want to get back into hiking more regularly than I have been. I think you do too.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely want to do some bike packing this year, maybe in Harper's Ferry. We are planning a trip to the Adirondacks, probably in the fall, which we have a couple big hikes we want to do there as well. So, yeah. You have anything you want to do this year?
Yeah, probably. I think a lot more of the bike packing. So he's got you a new bike. Mm-hmm. So you're gearing up and ready to go.
Yeah, I'm slowly getting bags for it. So it's exciting.
Yeah.
So I have to admit, bike packing is something I've never done. And I trying to remember, I was out in the middle of nowhere. Oh, I'm trying to remember if this was I want to say this may have been somewhere in Kentucky. And I'm even trying to remember why I was out on this. I was out in the middle of nowhere and I remember seeing a cyclist and they had gear hanging down on the left and right. And I thought, what in the world is this person doing? Hey, riding a bike out here. This wasn't even a country route. It was, man, I'm trying to remember where I was, but I just remember the road being very narrow. And I'm like, man, they're putting their life in their hands, really just biking on this. And it wasn't until after I saw them that I had kind of heard about bike packing. So I think like for me, I think some of the benefits and you mentioned them earlier, Josh, you mentioned that, hey, pack more water. I know listening to the last podcast with the guests that you all had on, talked about one of the advantages being, well, it's a lot easier to go like 20 miles, in one day versus backpacking. Are there other benefits, or I guess what's drawing you all to do bike packing?
We're not terribly far from the C&O and the Gap Trail that go from Pittsburgh to DC, I guess. And that's all completely or at least most of it is basically a closed path, so it keeps you off any roads. You don't have to worry too much about vehicles or things like that. And we've done a portion, and then I've done some portions with some friends too. And I think it's neat that you can camp, or you could probably do the whole thing and stay in like bed and breakfast if you wanted to. So it kind of gives a good opportunity, being that it's like a couple hours away, to either do, a big, maybe week-long trip, or you could do some overnighters, and there's campsites every 10 or 12 miles. So it kind of makes it appealing to be able to just go do that.
Yeah, I like that because it's been a long time since I've rode my bike regularly. And I like the idea that there's a campsite like every 10 miles. So I can be like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
And then we can just stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing you all mentioned in that episode, and I just listened to it, about 5 days ago, Max and I were hiking Cumberland Gap. And so that's about, to get to the Cumberland Gap National Park, I think it's about an hour. It's less than 90 minutes from my house. And I mean, it's pushing it pretty close. So we hiked that. What's great about that, there's, of course, Cumberland Gap, there's a lot of history there. And, Max and I both nerded out because there's a place where you can go where you're, it's called Tri-State Point, and you're technically in 3 states all at the same time. And then it's also connects, it's the north terminus or northern part of the Cumberland Trail, which is a trail that goes lengthwise north to south to the state of throughout the state of Tennessee, and it's a trail that they're still working on completing. So there were a lot of nerdy things about that for us, but on the drive back, we were stopping at a brewery, and it was close to our house where a buddy of mine plays the blues. He was going to play there, and so we had about roughly an hour, and so I threw in your all's episode. Because I got an update. It was the most recent one, and I was like, yeah, and it was again about bike packing. One thing I loved hearing, and this ties back to what you all were saying at the beginning, is that we love to do outdoorsy things, talk about things that people may not be there, they may not have experience in it, but they want to look into it. And one thing you all said about bike packing, I didn't think about, and Jessie, I think it was you. You mentioned one thing to recommend: be careful with the pants that you wear.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I have a bike. It is a worn out old. I think it's like maybe 35 years old. I bought it at a restoration store. I don't take the best care of it, but I have it. Sometimes I like to get out on the bike and bike to a greenway and then run the rest of that greenway. Or I like to bike a certain part of Knoxville, and I can bike from one side all the way to the other and have minimal time on an actual road. It's mainly greenway, which is great. I do that in the summer. I do that in the spring. I do it in the early fall when I'm wearing shorts. And so when you said that, because as I'm listening to the episode, I'm like, yeah, I could probably get into this. I've got a friend of mine, he has more than one mountain bike. I think I can probably talk him into doing this. And he's the type, when he just does something, he goes all in. I was like, I could picture him buying like all the stuff that we would need to do this. I sound like a terrible friend. I sound like a manipulator. But as I'm listening to all of this, again, this is something new for me. Kind of like what you all were talking about. This is, and it goes back to one of the reasons why I really, really enjoy your all's podcast, because I wouldn't have thought of that. Odds are, if we would have done this in the fall, I probably would be wearing, some loose fitting convertibles that I could like take off and go to pants and shorts, and I would be the one who. The pant leg would get caught in the chain.
Yeah, definitely.
And, oh my goodness, I would not want to be one of my friends. They'd never hear the end of it. Oh, it's out there biking, and I got caught in it. So I love it, because you could really just, in your all's titles, kind of for each podcast, kind of explain what y'all are covering. So, I'm interested in this. I want to listen to that and see and learn more. So I think it's great. I think it's informative. Again, for not just people who are new to do anything outdoors, but really for anybody. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you mentioned some trips you all are doing this year. As far as, do you all have like a go-to place, or whether it be a national park, a state park, or just a trail? Is there like a go-to place or a place that's really special for you all?
We love Shenandoah National Park. It's probably about 4 hours, but it's worth the drive, even going through DC and all the traffic. It's totally worth it. It's such a vast park, and there's so much you can see and do there. So we tend to go there quite often.
Yeah, I would say that. And we started kind of exploring that area in West Virginia. Was it Blackwater Falls? Yeah.
We really like it there a lot.
And Dolly Sods is near there.
We're just dipping our toe into Dolly Sods, and we really like it. We did a backpacking trip through there right at the start of me having that respiratory infection and didn't know I had it and had to cut it short because I couldn't do it. But we'd like to go back. It was really neat. I thought it was really difficult, and now I understand why it was difficult, because I had a respiratory infection.
Yeah,
right.
So I think we'd like to go back and definitely try that again.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah. Now I'm originally from the great state of West Virginia, so I am biased when I hear those locations, and so I think those are great spots. Do you all go out to the New River often, or is that
we did go there?
We have, yes.
2 years ago, maybe?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we really liked it. Like, we didn't raft.
No.
But we hiked around and we did the bridge walk, like underneath the bridge.
You
that
all
was
did
really cool.
You all did the underneath bridge walk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Max and I went there this past summer, and it was a spur of the moment kind of thing. We were actually going to go to South Carolina instead, and those plans had to change, unfortunately. And so I told Max, I was like, well, why don't we just go to the New River? And it was a few hours away. We were able to find a cabin for a couple of nights, and we did rafting. He was, he's still at that age where he can go for free if I pay for my own. We actually got a 2-person kayak with a group, and had a blast, had a great time.
Oh, cool.
And I tried as hard. I said, man, we should do the under walk, under the bridge. And I think I even played the Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge to kind of, maybe that deterred him. I don't know. But he when as we're driving there, he's like, yeah. Then when we drove over the bridge, this, and I was like, oh yeah. We'll go to the visitor center and get a great view. We'll get us a photo, for Instagram so all the people can like it. And I was like, but we'll also get a good look at the bridge. And we got there, and when he saw it, no. And almost turned Samuel L. Jackson on me. He was so defiant about it. So I was like, all right, Val, okay. All right, that's okay, Jules. We don't have to do that.
It's so funny because I planned the bridge walk, and I will always plan these crazy excursions, and then when it's time to do the excursion, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about this.
I'm always like, this was your idea.
So really? I understand where he's coming from.
Well, he didn't. Now, to his credit, he didn't plan it. I said we should do it. Oh yeah, that sounds like fun. And then and then when we get there, no, heck no, that does not look like fun. So it's he's a goofball, but he says that he may do it this year. So we'll find out. We plan on going back again because he can still raft for free. So I'm like, I'm going to
nice.
Oh yeah,
it was fun. It was a neat experience. Cool, I would do it again. I was definitely nervous, but it was fun.
Awesome. Going back to again, the idea of the podcast and things of that nature. Anyone who is wanting to kind of dip their toe in the water, what advice would you give?
I would say no matter what activity you're interested in, I found that most of them are costly. So if possible, borrow the equipment, see if you can rent their equipment. There's actually a lot of online sources now where you can rent camping equipment. So if it's something you're not that sure about, you could rent it or borrow it, use what you have around the house. Like, you don't have to get a sleeping bag, take your comforter. There are ways that you can do it on kind of the cheap if you're not sure if it's something you really like yet or not. So the first time I went camping, I borrowed a friend's tent. I took my pillow off my bed. I took my comforter, and then I fell in love with it. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to maybe start purchasing some camping gear for myself.
Yeah. And also the used market's like a huge, I think we barely own anything that's brand new.
No.
And then in the same hand, if you get something that maybe you use and you don't love it, you can also just turn around and sell it.
Yeah.
And so we've been pretty big on that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we love like eBay and Gear Trade and the local Facebook marketplaces.
Yeah,
is where we try to get most of our stuff from.
I think you mentioned Facebook Marketplace, and that's something that I tend to forget about And then every once in a while, I think the Facebook algorithm has realized that. So it starts giving me gentle reminders. It's weird because the gentle reminders it's giving me now are used vans that I guess that I can convert.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's also like old school buses as well. And Ashley, my girlfriend, and I, we were both laughing about it. And now she's starting to get them. Like she sent me a message. We talked about it. She's like, you mentioned it around me. Now all of a sudden they're popping up in mine. And I've never looked at them. And I tell her, I'm like, I don't know, Ashley. She's got an old Airstream that she's had for a while that she's going to convert. I was like, I don't know. No, you can't put that hurt on me, Ricky Bobby. I mean, that is. So, but she does. And then mentioning, like consignment stores, we have a great one here in Knoxville, Outdoor Gear Revival. They're locally owned. And, but then REI, and I recently did this because I'm getting into trail running. I did a couple of trail runs like over a decade ago, I think. And I was like, man, I really want to get back into it. My trail runners actually used to hike in are going bad. And so I need new shoes anyway. And I almost fell into paralysis through analysis. I just kept looking online and finally went to REI to try on a pair. And I was talking to the guy and it's like, well, the toe box isn't wide and I need a wide toe box. And he's like, finally, he was just like, Jeremy, no, you can always return them, and that's the great thing about REI is that, you've got, I think it's 2 years you can return something.
Yeah.
And he's like, and it doesn't have to break on you. It's just if they don't fit on you, you can return them. And I'm like, yeah. And I bought them. The hike I was mentioning to the Cumberland Gap, actually wore, that was the first time I wore them. I took them out with Max and I loved them. And then I did a trail run with a new group here in town on Monday, or new to me. They've been around forever. And then I found out they have like the best beer choice in town afterwards. Like they do it in a partnership might be the best term with a brewery that's close to my house. And they're like, oh yeah, afterwards we go to the brewery and beers are only $2, and they're normally not $2.
Oh no!
They take great pride in what they brew, and they're like, "You gonna go?" And I was like, "I can't turn down a deal like that." I also can't take advantage as much as I want to because I'm a responsible adult. But I was like, yeah. So REI is one of those other places that I think is a great source too. But again, that's news, so the cost is high, but knowing you can return it, I think is a plus. But one thing I've never even thought of, and I thought of it one time, and that is renting equipment. I had, and it's wild because I think we are coming up on the 4-year anniversary. So in 2019, longer before that, I went to Iceland and enjoyed it. Went by myself, had a great time, came back, and then my good friend David Waddell, who is a nut, he was just like, "Oh yeah, Karen and I, and that's the woman he was dating at the time. We were in Iceland for like 2 or 3 days, and I want to go back." And I was like, "Really?" And they had done like some kind of cruise or some kind of tour group where they started out in Nova Scotia, somehow made their way to Iceland, and then into Europe. And it must be nice with that kind of income.
That's nice.
And so he was like, "Oh man, we should get the guys to go." There's a group of guys we camp with, and we don't get to do it that much now because we've all gotten older. Some of them, Waddell's old enough to be my father, so a couple of them are old enough to be, are much older. I'm not gonna say they're old because they can still kick my butt. I'm not gonna say anything crazy. And then some guys my age are now kind of, entering in their mid-40s, and so we don't get together as much. And so when we do, we kind of like to make a deal about it. And so Waddell's like, "Well, why don't we go to Iceland?" And I said, "Okay, that sounds like a plan." He's like, "Oh, but we should go in the summer." Because I went in the winter. I went in March 2019, and I was like, all right, so March 2020 rolls around and he and I are planning it out. I've saved up money. He's saved up money. We've, convinced a couple of the guys to kind of come along. One of the guys kind of on the boat, he's on the fence. And, this is about 2 weeks before lockdown. We're like, "Oh, this thing's going to blow over. Don't worry. It's just a flu, And And so, being very, very optimistic. And so David says, he's like, yeah, well, I'm looking at the great thing about Iceland. And I was telling him, I was like, you get out in the country, and instead of, they have these, it's kind of like hostels, but they're farmhouses, and you stay on a farmhouse. And I told him, I was like, I stayed at one. It was great. And all this jazz. I was like, and it's affordable. It's very affordable. It was at the time. And David says, oh no, man, we'll just backpack. We'll just get I said, well, we could still backpack and stop at these places. Yeah, but we'll just tent, man. We'll tent. We'll just tent. And I said, okay. Well, in Iceland. Oh yeah, it'll be summer. Summer, it's like what, 30, 34, 36 degrees. And we camp in that weather all the time. And we do. I mean, we've camped in sub-zero. So I mean, so I'm like, and we've got the equipment. It's like, yeah, we can. And it's like, David, where are we going to get this equipment? Yeah. I'm sure we can. We could probably just bring a tent, yeah, on a plane. Oh yeah, we'll just check it, man. And I was like, all right. So we're going to the summer. He's like, yeah. And you think we're going to have trouble sleeping? Well, I told you, man, it's cold. I said, not cold. I said, but the sun's always going to be up. And how are we going to sleep with the sun up? And he's like, oh, yeah. And that's what he says. I bet there's a rental company. So I haven't even thought about renting. I'm over here kicking myself. I haven't even thought about renting anything as far as outdoor gear. In coming up now, like 4 years, and still haven't done it. So I need to check that out, especially if I want to. Especially if I want to get one of my buddies into bike packing. And so I keep wanting to call it bike camping. I guess that could be good too. But
that could be, yeah. we did a whitewater rafting trip in New Mexico years ago now. And we were able to rent. It was overnight, so it was a 2-day trip, and we were able to through them rent like camping gear.
Yeah, we rented like a tent, a sleeping bag, and everything we would need.
So we didn't have to fly out with all that. We could just use theirs.
Oh wow! No, that's smart. And again, David he's a very smart man. So he was thinking, when I mentioned all that, he's like, oh, we just rented. It's like, yeah, good point. And then like once we had it all figured out, the world shut down, and so we've yet to. We ended up doing a couple of trips to a couple of trips to Alaska. He gets me on board to go to Alaska, then he has to drop out last minute because of work, and then went with the guys, and we had a great time, and they're like, we should do this again. Would you be down for doing this again sometime, Jeremy? And I was like, yeah. And there was only 3 of us, and this was in 2020. And I'm thinking, all right, another 5 years from now, we'll probably go back or something like that. No, we went 10 months later. And so
nice.
that time David did get to go with us, and my father actually joined as well. And wearing the shirt.
Nice. That's
wearing
awesome.
the shirt from, I think I got it from that second trip, but we had a blast. But so he's, like I said, he's a nut. He's a great guy. We call him the Sage, and he definitely is. He's a smart guy. Jessie and Josh, thank you all very much for coming on. I appreciate the time you all took. Very thankful that you all were able to jump on, and love what you're doing. And if anyone else wants to kind of, get in on the fun, where can they find the podcast? Where can they find you all on the socials?
For our socials, we have TikTok, if it's still around, Instagram, we have Facebook and YouTube and Threads.
And the podcast is on Apple, Spotify, I think all the major
providers.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And I'll put all of that, all the links to the social sites, to the website and podcast as well in the show notes, or on YouTube in the description or whatever. You got to make sure I get my terminology correct here. But no, again, thank you all very much. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys put out there and your all's adventures this year.
Great. Awesome. Same. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Take care now.
That was great. Thanks again to Jessie and Josh for coming on and talking here on Price Points. Also want to say thank you to everyone who showed up for the Trails and Ales hike that we did with Peaceful Side Brewery. Had a tremendous turnout. Everyone had a blast and talking about some possible future endeavors and, or should I say future adventures. If you're interested in learning more, go to pricepoints.com. That's price-points.com. There you can sign up to receive notifications of changes, updates, all that good stuff. Well, until next time, thank you for listening to Price Points Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to like, share, leave a note, leave a comment, follow us wherever you listen or watch podcasts. Until next time, see you soon. Take care.